Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Vantage Points. I'm Hisham al-Maligi. Tonight, I have the pleasure also of having Davi Barker co-hosting this episode. Assalamu alaikum, Davi.
Walaikum salam.
How are you? It's been a week exactly since we had this marathon of the
It's
election.
been quite an exciting horse race.
Right. It got me burnt out, so I needed some time off. Yeah, but I think like we at least realized that we can do if we want, we can do even nightly if need be. But also like it's not necessary really. As I mentioned before, I don't like just talking. I'm not here to pontificate. I want to
Yeah.
present people with ideas and solutions and have dialogue with them rather than just talking to people. So I mean,
Well, if
acting.
anything, the election has demonstrated for us the value of applying some patience before you
Right.
jump to your announcements.
Right. Right. So anyway, tonight we have my dear friend Muhi Khwaja. He's the co-founder of the American Muslim Foundation. Let me bring him in and introduce him properly. Assalamu alaikum, Muhi.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me on, Hisham and Davi.
Thank you so much. So I missed the community part in the foundation, so that's why I put it right there on the screen. So American Muslim Community Foundation, and the website is amuslimcf.org. So I guess you took a muslimcf.org.
Exactly.
Very clever naming. So we will talk about that, but first I want to know about you, who you are, where you're from, what you've been through, and let's start with that. Tell us more about yourself. And Davi, of course, will have his own questions. So take it away.
Great, appreciate it. Born and raised in Michigan, in the Detroit community. Went to the University of Michigan. Was pretty involved on campus and. Through the youth group in my mosque, was just pretty active overall. So, seeing community members doing potlucks and hosting fundraisers and everything in between left more of an imprint on me than I had originally thought. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in undergrad after I lost an internship in engineering. It was kind of when the auto bailout was happening, and I saw people 10, 15 years my senior getting laid off. And also as an intern, I couldn't even hold a position. So it gave me a moment to pause and reflect and look at what I wanted to do for my career. Luckily, since I was active on campus, I was an orientation leader, I was student government president, I played rugby, and just really did a decent job at networking. So one of the friends that I had was the alumni relations director. And he mentioned to me that there was an internship available and that I should apply for the internship, and he thought I would be a good fit. That friend is Farhan Latif, who is a mutual connection of ours. And we've all been through the American Muslim Civic Leadership Institute program together amicably. But more on that later. Through this internship, I got to see how the University of Michigan fundraised. We figured out how alumni were engaged, how the sports teams were engaged, how the hospital was engaged, all the different departments and faculty in raising billions of dollars. So I found it really fascinating. And, 4 days a week we worked. And then on the 5th day, we took a class on philanthropy and best practices. So luckily, after undergrad, I got a job at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU. And I was one of their first full-time hires and only person focusing full-time on development, which is kind of like the art and science of fundraising. So that's kind of where I got really plugged into it, helping the organization diversify their revenue streams. Our community is so focused on event-centric fundraising, but back at that time in 2010, it was more like more of an opportunity for online fundraising. And, mailers were always the thing throughout the last few decades. And how could we bring those best practices into the organization to increase monthly revenue and everything in between? So focus on grant writing, event planning, the whole 9 yards. And after doing that for a few years, went back for my master's at the University of Michigan in public administration and nonprofit management. During that time, I also had a fellowship at ISNA. I did some consulting at Islamic Relief. Right after grad school, I moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area and worked at Ta'leef Collective, doing the same thing for about 2 years until I went to the American Red Cross, where I worked for 5 years as a major gift officer and worked with people like Condoleezza Rice, the family contacts for Mark Zuckerberg, and so many other tech CEOs and professionals in the Silicon Valley area. So worked with them to build a relationship on their commitment to the Red Cross and helped them raise millions of dollars over the years. So that's kind of been my background. And when I went to the Red Cross, I thought to myself, like, how can I be committed to the Muslim community? I don't want to keep doing these like one-off projects or consulting here or there. So I looked at the nonprofit industry within the Muslim community. I looked at how donors gave, how nonprofits fundraised, and looked at other communities, faith-based communities like the Christian community, the Jewish community, and what institutions did they have? So there's over 700 community foundations across the country, but none of them were reflective of the Muslim community in particular. So that was the opportunity that we started American Muslim Community Foundation around.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So when did the organization, when did you found it? Who were with you, and what's the story there?
Yeah, so back in 2016, I had reached out to my network of nonprofit leaders in the Muslim community that I knew. And one night in March, I BCC'd like 500 nonprofit professionals and kind of shared this vision with them. And by getting connected to one person who had a similar idea here or there, kind of got connected with our co-founders for AMCF. And there's a sister named Safa Ibrahim. She was heavily involved in CARE California, CARE National, a few local mosques as well. Then there was another sister, Ayat Al-Nouri. She's in HR. And then there was a brother, Ayman Al-Sawah, and he's in IT security. So the four of us are the co-founders of AMCF and kind of brainstormed and did a strategic plan on what are the gaps and opportunities and what can AMCF do to differentiate itself and be of service. So we came up with providing donor advice. And this was like a strategic plan for 5 years. And alhamdulillah, we're now coming to that 5-year mark very soon in the next few months. And it was, let's look at what donor advised funds are. Let's look at what giving circles are. Let's look at endowments and fiscal sponsorship. So that really solidified like the services that AMCF would provide. And then we knew we wanted to do something to support the leadership development and capacity building of nonprofit organizations. So we would do that through grant making, through webinars for best practices, and really just helping organizations become stronger and build relationships with their donors more effectively. So alhamdulillah, through the years, we've now been able to give out more than $3 million to nonprofit organizations, working with about 85 families. So if you just think of it, there's so much potential in the American Muslim community to have thousands of donor advised funds at AMCF. And, there's a lot of families who have their own private family foundations, and that's great. And there's even a lot of Muslim families who have donor advised funds at Fidelity or Schwab or other institutions. But there's something about being more strategic about our collective impact and power that we can have together. So we're encouraging people. We've had people transition their donor advised funds to us. We've had people set up giving circles for their groups of family and friends to give together and be more effective with their zakat and sadaqah.
Impressive.
This sounds like it would be a kind of lifeline in the age of a pandemic. I imagine if a charity was dependent on event fundraising primarily, they would be underwater at this point.
I would say that the organizations that had a strategy in place did really well. They were able to fundraise in Ramadan without too many hiccups. Those organizations, such as mosques or charities that go to mosques during Taraweeh and iftars and everything like that, maybe they had to change their game plan altogether. But if they still had a strategy in place, they did okay. Now, that being said, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of Muslim-led institutions that needed help. There were imams and staffers and other people out of work, right? So the AMCF actually worked with almost a dozen relief agencies and also community leaders across the country to do what we called the COVID-19 Relief Fund for nonprofits. And through a Launch Good campaign, we were able to raise over $360,000 that was then distributed through a grant process to over 75 nonprofits across the country. So, we're trying to be creative. We're trying to help out all nonprofits. We want to make sure that we provide these best practices and coach nonprofit organizations on how they can be more effective with their donors as well.
That's amazing. So can you walk us through, for those who are not familiar with the system, how it works? You have different models of giving, and like you take from individuals or families, and then you give that money to certain organizations based on certain criteria. So walk us through this. How could an individual or a family designate or just give to you, and then you designate to certain organizations?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research out there about charitable giving in America overall, and one of the main reports is called Giving USA. So they actually say that the average charitable household gives about $3,000. And that's why AMCF started our donor advised funds at a minimum of $2,500 or more. So if you're somebody who gives in that ballpark, you can open up a donor advised fund. And the best part about it is you get to consolidate all of your giving. So instead of collecting a receipt for $10 or $100 or $5,000 from multiple charities, you can then give to AMCF upfront. And you can give appreciated assets. And if you give stock or other means of appreciated assets, then you're going to be avoiding a capital gains tax, which will save you about 15 to 20% in taxes. Wow. So there's a lot of advantages of working through a donor advised fund to do all of your charitable giving. And when you open up a DAF, it's really like a charitable savings account. Whatever money you put in, you get the automatic tax deduction for it. You get to decide which charities you give to at a later time. It can be years later. It could be that same year. It's really up to your timeline and what your philanthropic goals are. You can make gifts in honor of a loved one. So you could set up Sadaqah Jariyah projects. And it allows you to invest the balance for future charitable growth. So those are the key components of why a donor advised fund are more strategic and a great opportunity for you and your family to be thinking about your long-term impact. And the other opportunity is what's called the giving circle. So say you and a group of friends from college or in your local community, you like to support different causes and you like to learn about different causes. So you can set a minimum that everybody pitches in or no minimum, and people will participate. They'll nominate different nonprofits. They'll learn about them. You can set, a cadence of, okay, we'll give monthly, we'll give quarterly, or just in Ramadan or at the end of the year. And you and your friends come up with the guidelines of giving and reviewing, and then we help you distribute those funds. Now, what's really unique about 2020 is that the CARES Act allows every family whether they itemize or not, to make a $300 charitable gift that will be deductible. Now, for families who do itemize, they will be able to give 100% in cash of their adjusted gross income. So if there's a family who is, pretty well off or has cash reserves, they can make a sizable gift in 2020, avoid any penalties, and they can also receive that deduction for that year and then carry it over. And then same thing for corporations. In years past, it was only 10%, and it's been increased to 25%. So it's a really good time to talk to your financial advisor, your CPA, wealth manager, whoever you have at your access, to think of these things that can help you be more charitable at the end of the day.
Amazing. So let's take an individual who every now and then gets a solicitation, let's say Islamic Relief, give us $100 for orphans in somewhere. ICNA Relief is doing some food distribution in Baltimore. I mean, I'm just making up stuff. So sure. every week, or every day, actually, now you get something like that. Are you saying that that individual could develop with you, with AMCF, a donor advised fund, put the annual sum of their charity, and then choose which charities to give to? Like it's just a formality, making it through you rather than directly from him or her to these organizations?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the benefit, you may say, well, I can just contribute to all of those charities. But again, the benefit is you get one consolidated receipt at tax time, right?
Yeah, you remove your paperwork burden.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Is it any charity at all, or do you have like a list of participating charities?
So all 501c3s are eligible, but we have our own vetting process, and that's a great question. So we have our own nonprofit directory on our website. And to date, over the last few years, we've been able to add in more than 500 and about 50 nonprofit organizations. And there's everything from universities, food banks, and non-religious organizations to Muslim-led institutions as well. Because we want to show that the Muslim community cares about the local community, about different causes across the country. So it's important where you as an individual, you may give to, say, your alma mater or your local food bank, but they don't know that you're inspired by your faith to give as well. And there's research done by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding on American Muslim philanthropy, and it shows that Muslims are just as likely to give to faith-based work and this equally to organizations outside of our faith community as well.
Very interesting. So therefore, this is not limited to Muslims giving. Anybody could give and designate which charities they want to. The only difference is when a Muslim is giving, it's also considered an act of worship, whether it's a sadaqah or zakat.
And the great thing is the nonprofit will receive a report. This came from Hisham, this came from Davi, this came from Muhi, and so on and so forth. And it'll say the amount, the project, and whether it was zakat or sadaqah. So the organizations receiving it understand clearly who the money is coming from. And you yourself, you'll get to see all the different projects that you've committed to as well.
And at the end of the year, you receive one receipt for your taxes, avoiding all this paperwork and hassle to go through. So, exactly. Like, do I, for example, go and create an account on AMCF website? How does it work?
Yeah, so we actually have an intake form, and that intake form allows us to better understand your charitable giving preferences. You let us know your favorite charities, how much you generally give, what projects mean more to you. And based on that, we can also create like a giving profile. So if you say you're passionate about education, you say you're passionate about food insecurity, we can show you other charities that are doing similar work. And 9 times out of 10, people know what charity they want to give to. But when it comes to zakat, some people are very particular of what are the regulations, who gave them their zakat eligibility, or can zakat or sadaqah be given to non-Muslim institutions? So there's a lot of questions around there. And, we don't claim to have all the answers, but we've worked with scholars in zakat and finance, and we have our religious advisors that help us through these questions.
And I saw the list of advisors that you have, and including Muslim financial gurus. Okay. So,
is this U.S. only, or do some of these charities do international work?
That's a great question. So we will, in our annual fees, right? It's very affordable. So for anything under $20,000, it's only $125 a year. When you cross that $20,000 threshold, it becomes 0.65% up to the first $500,000. And alhamdulillah, we have families that have pretty sizable accounts with us. But majority of the families, they'll pay that administrative fee. If they want to support an international charity, like they're operating in another country, there's an additional fee because we work with a third party to give those financial transactions, because there's a lot of IRS regulations around international giving. So we want to make sure that whatever money is given to AMCF is deductible. And then we have to follow a set of codes and ethics and responsibility to make sure that those tax deductible gifts are being given to charitable organizations internationally. But definitely any registered 501c3 in the United States, whether they operate internationally, locally, or regionally, they're eligible to receive funding from us.
Okay.
So to follow up on that, let's say Islamic Relief has basically all over the world functions. So you give here, you get a tax receipt from here, whether or not the money is spent on U.S. soil or overseas.
Well, since they're a U.S.-based charity, that would fulfill the requirement. And out of the $3 million that we've given out, Islamic Relief is the top charity that has received the most funding from us.
Okay, excellent. Is there a possibility to give to an international charity, non-U.S. based, but in this case, it wouldn't be tax deductible?
So generally speaking, if you as an individual wanted to give, like say, the blast that happened in Beirut, right? The Lebanese Red Cross is an international organization. If you wanted to give to Lebanese Red Cross, say you wanted to give $500, you wouldn't be able to deduct that because they're an international charity. But if you gave to AMCF first, and then we paid the funds to Lebanese Red Cross through our third party, then yes, the deduction would be available to you for that $500.
Because
amazing.
From our perspective, the donation is to you, and you're the one transferring it overseas.
Right.
That's amazing. So, I mean, basically the whole world is open as long as it fulfills your criteria at AMCF.
Exactly. And there's a vetting process for the international charities, for the US-based charities. And we take that seriously because we want to make sure that whatever funds are given to us are A, accounted for, and B, used for the intended purpose that the donor wanted.
Does that ever put you in a position to have to handle foreign currencies?
So we haven't yet, because all of the transactions that we do are in US dollars. So when we give it to the third party, they're still giving US dollars to the end recipient as well.
All right.
And of course, this topic raises the issue of the US government and lists and whatnot of people and organizations overseas that you should not be dealing with. How do you handle this issue?
So if you look at our 990s, right, we provide full financial transparency and disclosure as well. So on paper, it shows that we are supporting our third party who's making the international transactions. So if there really was an audit trail, it'd have to be very detailed to then showcase who did that third party end up supporting as well. And, we're not hiding anything. We'd be more than happy to say who ended up receiving those funds. But in terms of legal compliance and everything, when it comes to the IRS 990, we simply have to showcase that it was given to that third party.
Gotcha. And are you at liberty to share the name of that third party? Or?
Yeah, of course. It's called CAF America. So I think it's called like Charitable Aid Fund America.
Yeah. And that's not a Muslim organization?
No.
Okay. And they deal everywhere across the world?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course, they have their own vetting process as well,
exactly.
Compliance with U.S. government rules and everything else.
Yeah. And they partner with hundreds of community foundations across the country to do their international transactions. So they're a recommended and trusted partner.
Excellent. Excellent. Man, so I read like on the website, and the website is right on the screen, amuslimcf.org, that there are different types of giving. Can we go through them? So if we said this donor advised funds, this is the one we discussed. What else is there and how does it work?
Yeah, of course. The giving circles are really fun. Some of them operate as a group of friends who play fantasy football together, and they each pitch in $500. And then at the end of the season, whoever wins, the top 3 players get to decide which nonprofits get those funds. Others are more serious, where there's a minimum expectation, and some families, alhamdulillah, are giving $5,000 of zakat, and they go through a whole vetting process of charities that they recommend, and then they narrow it down to 2 that get a lump sum payment from their zakat. And then there are others that are, no minimums, but they support the community across New York. So some are regional based, some are family based, some are friend based, but the giving circles are a really great way to engage your group of friends in meaningful projects and get them to learn more. And I think, as nonprofits are struggling to kind of figure out how they can fundraise, if their donors, if their supporters can be more proactive in engaging their networks, that will go a long way as well.
It's pretty decent. And what else? What other types are there?
So those are the 2 primary donor services that we provide. On the nonprofit side, like I said, we provide endowment services. So a nonprofit can come to us with a lump sum payment, or say they want to give X percentage of their revenue each year to be invested, and AMCF will manage the investment on their behalf. And then the last one is called fiscal sponsorship. And what that allows is, instead of a project creating their own 501c3, going through the IRS, going through state filing, going through creating a bylaws and a whole organization, they can simply do what's called a fiscal sponsorship. And we collect the funds for them and then distribute the funds to be reimbursed by the individuals who are running the project. So it allows for their supporters to still support, get a tax deductible donation, even though that project isn't a nonprofit, because we're lending our 501c3 status to that project. A lot of times it helps new projects.
It's like an umbrella charity.
Yeah, pretty much. And it allows those new organizations, sometimes a lot of grants require 3 years of operations before they can apply for a grant. But if this new project is gaining a lot of steam, but they don't have those 3 years, they can find a fiscal sponsor who has 3 years of finances and apply for those grants under that 501c3. So there's a lot of different ways in which we can help organizations just focus on their mission, right? And then we can handle the donation processing, providing the receipts to all their donors, and working together with them to make more of an impact.
That doesn't require lots of employees or professionals to handle that?
So we have a bookkeeper, we have a treasurer, we have part-time staff who are helping manage all of that. And we actually have 13 fiscal sponsorship projects right now. We have 8 giving circles. We have 85 donor advised funds. We have about 6 endowments. Our assets under management are fairly small. It's still between $750,000 to $1 million. But like I said, the impact has been being able to get money out the door. So we've worked with all of these families and institutions to give more than $3 million in the last few years. MashaAllah.
Are there any similar organizations in the Muslim community in the United States?
So there's, like I said, there's a lot of private family foundations, and many of them give grants and have been really successful in helping the community. As we mentioned, Farhan from Amically, he helps run the El Hibri Family Foundation. And another Amically person, Kashif Sheikh, runs the Pillars Fund. And Pillars Fund, they've been around longer than we have, and I really look up to them as an example of grant making and best practices. And they've been operating as a giving circle that a group of families come together. They give $25,000 each year, and then they decide on how to distribute those funds through a grant making process. AMCF focuses on more than just the grant making, because we provide all of these other services as well. And I think there's a lot of ways in which all of our organizations collaborate. And there's also the Rise Together Fund, which is led by Shireen Zaman at Proteus Fund. And they focus in particular on the Masa community, Middle Eastern, Arab and South Asian community. No.
That's very good. I was actually thinking of inviting Kashif and others on this show, but I remembered that you have a very important event coming up. You want to tell us now?
Yeah, of course. And would love to have that conversation with them on our own podcast, which we have the Muslim Philanthropy podcast, or be a guest on your show again, and have those fruitful discussions. So November 14th, we're having an event on Saturday with Hassan Minaj. He's going to be our special guest speaker. And in addition to that, we have two really great panels planned out. One is on nonprofits creating a better tomorrow. And that conversation is moderated by Justin Mashouf. And he's going to be joined with Marguerite Hill from Muslim Arc and Osama Mezawi from Penny Appeal USA. And then the next panel is on the role of zakat and sadaqah in social justice. And that panel is going to be with Sayeda Jaffrey from the Hub Foundation. And she's moderating the discussion. And the other two guests are Dr. Muhammad Kaisar-Uddin from Zakat Chicago and Ustada Aisha Prime from Dar al-Hijra. So really power-packed program. This event, we're also doing what's called the Muslim Philanthropy Awards. So it's the first time we're doing this event, doing these awards. There have been over 40 nominations across the country, representing communities all over the world, actually, and different categories like lifetime achievement, fundraising professional, young professional, outstanding youth, outstanding nonprofit, and other categories that will really be able to celebrate the community overall. And then we're going to end the program with entertainment by Yasmin Al-Hadi and Umar Afendam. So tickets are $25 for individuals or students. Families can also pay $50 or $150. There's really no verification. You pay what you want in those three categories. And if somebody can't afford it, just reach out to us and we'll provide a free ticket as well.
That's awesome. And this is this Saturday.
Yes.
Such a packed event with very good speakers and comedy and performance as well, in addition to the invaluable knowledge in the two panels that will be part of it. What time on Saturday will it be?
Yeah, so it'll be 11 a.m. Pacific until 2 p.m. Pacific. So that's 1 to 4 p.m. Central or 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern.
This Saturday, November 14th.
Correct.
Excellent. And it's going to be on Zoom, right?
So it's actually a platform called vFairs. We didn't want to do the same old Zoom call again.
Right.
And vFairs is really fantastic because it provides a really engaging platform. So when you go in, it'll be a virtual world. There's a lobby, then there's an auditorium where the lectures will happen. And then there's also an exhibit hall. And we have over 20 sponsors who have booths. So you'll get to engage with the sponsors. And we actually have an auction that'll be taking place as well. So you'll get to see all of that through this platform called vFairs. And it's not your regular Zoom call. So
what kind of auction items?
So a few of the auction items that we have secured so far are, Ottoman ceramic plates, religious books, other artwork. Some clothing lines are donating some items. So there'll be about like 10 to 15 really unique pieces for people to bid on and learn more.
Excellent. And for people to get tickets, they go to amuslimcf.org.
Yep. And then /awards. Or even if you go on our landing page, you'll see the annual symposium in the menu bar.
You mentioned a podcast. How do people find that?
Yeah, so same thing on our website, and then /pod. So we just kind of launched it earlier this year, and we've done a lot of interviews with our nominees. So it's really great to get a sense of who these people are, why they were nominated, and we're actually going to announce who wins at the event. So nobody knows other than our planning committee who reviewed the nominations. So we're really excited to share more on the awardees as well.
That's awesome. So let's talk about priorities in American Muslim philanthropy. Have you done studies? I mean, you mentioned you worked at ISPU for 3 years, and I bet I've seen a change or a development in ISPU over the past few years, and I think you had a hand in that. So tell us more about the priorities that you see for the American Muslim community as far as philanthropy and projects and building institutions rather than haphazard spending over projects that doesn't last forever.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of opportunities where you as a donor can figure out what are those causes that you're really passionate about. What speaks to you? Is it about providing equity to school children in a developing country so that they can break the cycle of poverty? Is it focusing on projects in our own backyard? Is it both? What are those causes that will help move American Muslim communities forward through our civil rights or through, mental health? And there's so many different causes that the community needs to support. But what I would suggest is finding those 3 to 5 causes that really speak to you and do research on what are the organizations, whether they're Muslim-led institutions or outside of our faith community institutions that are able to make a difference in those areas. Take your time, do your research, figure out how you can get involved beyond your financial contributions. What can you do to volunteer? What can you do to tell other people about these organizations? The organizations themselves can only do so much. They need a network of supporters. They need people who can tell their story for them as well. So when you figure out what those causes are that you're passionate about, then you can kind of dig a little bit deeper and figure out who are the organizations doing great work in these fields. And then once you figure out who those organizations are, you can take it a step further to say, what can I personally do to help this mission, help this cause? And not everyone has thousands of dollars to give away. But I think everybody has some time. If something that they're passionate about, they can focus on an issue. And maybe they have a talent of being a great strategic planner or being a great designer or being somebody who can really share things with their network. And those are the things that you can do to help make a difference. Like, I really appreciate the opportunity of just being on this show and telling more people about AMCF. So, even something like that is super meaningful and allows other people to learn more about more causes. So, it doesn't always have to be financial, but when it is, that's awesome. But there's so many different ways that people can make a difference.
So, is there thinking of making, for example, a database of volunteer opportunities at these organizations?
You took the question right out of my brain.
Like mine's.
Yeah, I've seen of some organizations, like there's a new job posting site called Sabil Network. So Sabil Network has a lot of job postings, and some are volunteer opportunities. But I think there is an opportunity, even from the network of nonprofits that AMCF works with, these 550 nonprofits or so, to kind of dig a little bit deeper. What are the opportunities that you have for engagement? What do you need help with? Beyond financial resources, what are the leadership development pain points? What are the capacity building issues? And really hear from the nonprofits on the ground in this grassroots networks community to kind of see what can we do to connect the dots. And if there's a donor that's passionate about something, if there's a volunteer that wants to connect, I think there's a really good opportunity to create that type of nonprofit resource center where nonprofits can connect with people who want to help them make a difference as well.
Excellent. While we're talking, a few charities came to mind that would be great recipients or candidates for receiving. For example, one is a Muslim run and founded in Brooklyn, New York. It's called Muslims Giving Back. Shout out to Muhammad Bai. Are they part of the recipients of AMCF?
So I'm pretty sure they just filled out the form very recently because there's a group of, there is a giving circle called the Ummah Giving Circle in New York. And they're funding a lot of different causes in the New York area. So I'm pretty sure that one's on the list now.
Awesome.
That's an interesting question in and of itself. Is it on the charity to come to you and apply to become a member, or can it be that donors are like, I want to donate to this charity, and they can nominate someone to enter?
Yeah, it's kind of worked both ways, because out of those 550, we haven't funded all of them. So a lot of nonprofits have self-identified, but it's probably about a good 300 of them have received funding from us.
Okay, so so the charity either get nominated by a donor, or they find out about AMCF and apply to be part of the roster, basically. And they go through the vetting process. So what? Let's say I want to nominate the other charity, or not charity. It's a project in the CUNY, City University of New York Law School, CLEAR project, creating law enforcement accountability, and I forgot the end. So it is headed by a Muslim professor, Ramzi Qasim. Shout out to Ramzi. And most, at least the majority of its clients are Muslim New Yorkers. So something like this, what do they need to do?
So CUNY would fill out the form on behalf of the university, and then that would make the university or any of its projects eligible to receive funding. And again, we've had large organizations like Doctors Without Borders, University of Michigan, Stanford University, and again, hundreds of nonprofits fill out this form. So that's the process that they would go through. There's a form on our website, so that's kind of split up by donors and then nonprofits. And their nonprofit eligibility form is what they would be looking for to fill out.
Excellent. That's an amazing work. Like, basically you're facilitating the platform to make it easier and faster and streamlined for charity and philanthropy in the American Muslim community. So kudos to you and your co-founders, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and enable you to do more good, inshallah, as time comes.
Ameen.
So so far you distributed, you mentioned about $3 million.
Correct.
Okay. Is there something that is striking that the funds are going towards?
So, I mean, a significant amount is international relief agencies. Those are often the most common. But what's interesting is that research that I talked about at Indiana University, the Giving USA report, it showcases that majority of funding goes to religion, then education. So if you think about it, I would argue that the Muslim community probably is there, but this disaster relief, international humanitarian aid is probably a subsequent of that religion dominant giving as well. So, these charities like Islamic Relief and Helping Hand and so many others, they raise close to $100 million a year, which is really phenomenal. Like I said, overall in 2019, Americans gave $450 billion. So I don't know if Muslims being 1% of the population, I don't think we're giving $4 billion just yet to nonprofit organizations. We might be giving that much overall because a lot of our zakat goes overseas or to individuals and isn't tracked, right? A lot of this sadaqah and zakat is just giving to people that we know rather than institutions. So it's hard to track that data, but I think as more institutions like the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, Pillars Fund, and American Muslim Community Foundation, and of course Launch Good come around, we can try to track what that impact is in the United States a little bit more closely.
Excellent.
So with this whole buffet of charities at your disposal, what are the causes that are important to you personally?
Oh man, that's a great question. So a few of my favorites ever since college has been like Amnesty International. Very fond of Islamic Relief, but also another charity called Indian Muslim Relief and Charities. There's also Islamic Scholarship Fund. They help fund my master's degree. Same thing with Islamic Society of North America. Then we were talking about AMICLE, the American Muslim Civic Leadership Institute at University of Southern California. There's also Rockwood Leadership Group. There's so many institutions that focus on leadership development, mentorship, and those are kind of now the focus areas that I want to contribute back to. And of course, American Muslim Community Foundation, this is what I live, eat, and breathe every single day. So I think that's, it's my way of giving back to the entire nonprofit community because our donors are supporting so many causes.
Excellent. Have you reached out to other larger organizations in like AMCF, Muslim or non-Muslim? I mean, in the United States, of course, the Muslim ones are still also being in the development phase.
Sure.
But are there other funds that you can work with, and can they give money to the organizations that you vetted?
Yeah, so we're working on a few different partnerships, and even for our annual symposium, we received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or Annie E. Casey Foundation, and Margaret Casey Foundation, and California Community Foundation, and East Bay Community Foundation. So we're building a lot of mainstream institutional relationships with philanthropic grant-making institutions. As we're continuing to grow, one of our line items will be how can we get funding from these larger philanthropic institutions out the door to Muslim-led charities as well. So I think that's definitely part of the conversation. But on the flip side, like how can we strengthen the relationship of, say, charities like American Red Cross and Doctors Without Border and American Cancer Society with the Muslim community as well? So, the conversation goes both ways, and we want to showcase that Muslims still care about those mainstream institutions as well.
Right. That's amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I'll leave the floor to you. Actually, I think we covered it all. Davi, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious to know if you have any, like you said, you had a 5-year plan, and it sounds like you were about rounded up. So I'm kind of curious what the next plan is, if you have anything like that in mind. But also in the last minutes we have left, plug your stuff. Give us your website, your contact info, whatever you want.
Yeah, definitely. So, that 5-year plan, we've always assessed it quarterly. And we've always adjusted, we set goals and metrics and how can we achieve that. Right now, I think this annual symposium was definitely one of those pie in the sky ideas. Like, how can we bring the community together to have discussions on thought leadership about zakat and sadaqah and nonprofit best practices? So it's great to see, we're here. But now it's going to be like, how do we continue to have these conversations? And one of the things that we did new this year also was called our Social Impact Accelerator. So we did an 8-webinar series, everything from starting your nonprofit to marketing to building a board to strategic planning and so many other topics. And we had over 40 registrants per each session. So again, helping hundreds of nonprofit leaders develop these best practices that they can take back to their organizations. So we want to do more in that consultative space, in that webinar space. We also know that there's a huge potential to go from these 85 donor advised funds to thousands. And how do we get there in the next 5 years to help us scale and partner? So I think those are going to be the things that, establishing more endowments for Muslim-led nonprofits, entering into more fiscal sponsorship opportunities, creating more giving circles. We're going to stick to these core things because there's such a need and impact that they create. So that's really, it's hard for me to kind of quantify like how many will we have in 5 years. I think that we'll definitely get closer to that 1,000 mark for each of those services, and that's kind of the exciting thing.
You're essentially saying, you're describing a launching pad for charities, not just a fundraising mechanism, but like a literal, almost like a workshop.
An incubator, basically.
Yeah. That's the word.
Yeah, and that's why we called it a social impact accelerator, because we want to help these organizations grow and get these best practices in place. There's opportunities for growth for this accelerator right there. In San Francisco, we have this program for startups called Y Combinator, right? And thinking of like, how can startups get to that scalability phase and get introduced to angel investors and all of those things? We should be doing the same thing for our nonprofit organizations. So that's kind of the long-term vision of that particular social impact accelerator program.
The Muslim Legal Fund of America, MLFA, and their Center for Constitutional Rights for Muslims, they do a lot of this work from like establishing best practices and establishing the paperwork for charities. Have you done any work with them, or it's the same model of what you do?
Yeah, so even like Muslim Public Affairs Council, Muslim Advocates, MLFA, like you mentioned, a lot of them provide some of these core services of what should be included in your bylaws, in your articles of incorporation. And we do want to create a nonprofit resource center that will house all of those resources. So we don't want to necessarily recreate the wheel. We want to collaborate, right? And that's going to be a big thing in the coming years, and how we get to supporting more nonprofits, helping them get off the ground, and combining our webinars and provide them to others for their use and consumption as well. I do want to plug our social media handles. So it's the same as our URL, A Muslim CF. So whether you're on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, you can find us, A Muslim CF. You can find us by typing in the whole name, American Muslim Community Foundation. And again, on the podcast, we're on Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. So just look up Muslim Philanthropy Podcast and it'll come up.
Awesome. Muhi, Khwaja, co-founder of the American Muslim Community Foundation. Thank you so much for coming on Vantage Points. I wish you the best of luck, inshallah, on Saturday's symposium.
Thank you.
You're always welcome to come here. I'm just an email away. And I wish, inshallah, next year we will be talking about those thousands of charities that the foundation supported. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This comes to the end of this episode of Vantage Points. There are hashtags and there is a hashtag. This is the hashtag. Take care, America.
Love it. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.